President Biden reacting to this Supreme Court decision, striking down his student loan relief program. This was something that would have helped some 43 million Americans. It would have cost more than $400 billion. And in some cases would have allowed borrowers to basically forgive loans of up to $20,000. The president saying that I know there are millions of Americans who are disappointed, discouraged, maybe a little angry. President criticizing Republicans, saying that the hypocrisy is stunning. But he also went on to outline a new plan, saying that this new approach would be grounded in the Higher Education Act, something that he'll be working on with Secretary Cardona. They said they're going to be relieving loans under certain circumstances. He says it's going to take a little bit longer, but they're moving on it. The president also outlining a plan to temporarily basically have an on-ramp, a 12-month on-ramp, a repayment program, saying the Department of Ed won't refer borrowers for 12 months. And that is something that they are working on going forward. But we heard the president pretty forcefully respond to press members who asked him if he gave borrowers false hope. He said no. Republicans took that away. He was also asked by my colleague Faith Abube if he overstepped his authority. The president responding by saying the court misinterpreted the Constitution. Now, I want to bring in ABC News senior national reporter Ann Flaherty, also business reporter Alexis Christoforous, and legal contributor and the assistant dean at Yale Jackson School of Global Affairs, Asha Rangappa. And let's start with you. Some takeaways from these Biden remarks, these new measures that he's pushing, these new measures that he's pursuing. I mean, what do you make of them?
Well, Alex, as you mentioned, I mean, it was a very defiant president who said that he believed he was on solid legal ground, but also that he would try again. So we know that he rooted this argument, this legal argument, in a law known as the HEROES Act. That was something that was written after 9/11 that said a president can waive or modify loans in times of war or other national emergencies. What he's doing is exactly what advocates wanted him to do almost from the beginning. They said, look, that's not the law you want to be citing here. The law that you want to be citing is just the Higher Education Act, the act that set up the loan program in the first place. This is the law that LBJ signed into law that gave the president the right to issue these types of loans. And they say that that gives him essentially turns him into a bank and that he can waive the loans if he wants to. That's going to take some time. It is not a guarantee. I would expect that this is going to drag into next year, possibly into 2024. The other thing he talked about was he's going to give people a 12-month grace period. Now, what to know about that? Interest is still going to accrue. It just means that he won't be flagging people's accounts and sending them to collection, essentially, during that 12-month grace period. So that will help some people, but not all. Basically, this fight is not over, Alex.
Gotcha. Well, and I also want to bring in ABC News' Jay O'Brien at the White House. Jay, I mean, these were some really strong remarks here from the president.
Yeah, and Alex, let me kind of set the stage for you here of what's going to happen in the next few moments. So the president just spoke. Right now, the White House press corps is gathering in the press room because now there's going to be a briefing with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre and the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, who is just there standing behind the president. And they're going to give more detail about this program that the president unveiled. You and I have been talking over the course of the day that the question that hung over President Biden was, what is the backup plan? What is the plan B? And as you saw Rachel just allude to and Ann just talk about, the president talking about two kinds of plans simultaneously. One, to give borrowers a little bit of breathing room, and one which is a much bigger swing, which is, as Ann was just outlining, using the Higher Education Act to forgive or at least cut down some of the amount of money that these borrowers owe. That is something that, if it holds up in court, if it survives challenges, will certainly take some time, as Ann just outlined, experts saying that that could be well past the 2024 election. But the president saying that he is not going to give up hope, that he's not going to stop looking for avenues to try to forgive big chunks of this money that's owed by borrowers. I want to bring you a little bit to something that the president said within that vein, him outlining one of the strategies that he's deploying here. Here's a little bit of what the president said.
That's why we're creating a temporary 12-month, what we're calling on-ramp repayment program. And now, this is not the same as a student loan pause. It's been in effect for the past 3 years. Monthly payments will be due. Bills will not go out and interest will be accruing. And during this period, if you can pay your monthly bills, you should. But if you cannot, if you miss payments, this on-ramp will temporarily remove the threat of default or having your credit harmed, which can hurt borrowers for years to come.
We're expecting to get a little bit more detail, even more detail than what the president just offered in that briefing moments from now. Another thing worth unpacking, though, here, Alex, is the president talking about the paycheck protection loans that were issued during the pandemic and how those small business loans were forgiven. Some loans obtained by Republican members of Congress. I mean, the White House has repeatedly pointed out. And the president saying that those same Republican members of Congress who were in favor of that move oppose forgiving this student loan debt. And the president's point there, I'll quote him directly, is that the, quote, hypocrisy is stunning. The president then ending his remarks by saying we're going to get this done, God willing, referring to student loan forgiveness. And as you mentioned, when he gets asked by our colleague, Faith Abube, who is there in the room, if he overstepped his authority, as the high court said he did earlier today, he says that the court, quote, misinterpreted the Constitution. He also pushed back on the notion that by doing this, he gave borrowers false hope. Alex.
Yeah, well, the president obviously really leaning in on what he called hypocrisy, juxtaposing Republicans that were in favor, as you outlined, the PPP program, but not in favor of this. But Asha, I want to bring you in on this. First, what do you make of these points that the president has outlined thus far, and could they potentially face legal challenges?
Yes, that's what struck me. So the Higher Education Act also has a provision that allows the Secretary of Education to compromise or waive or release federal student loans. So this is still a case of delegated authority under legislation for the Secretary of Education to, make tweaks to these programs. It's a similar idea. The question is, will they face litigation in the same way, and will the court also see this as going too far? It sounds like what President Biden is doing now is maybe something more incremental and over a longer time horizon, which might be more kind of in keeping with the scope of the authority under the Higher Education Act, which, by the way, has previously been used to have public service loan forgiveness and income-based repayment. So this might be more consistent, but it's not going to be as immediate or big as I think what Biden had tried to do under the HEROES Act.
Gotcha. Asha, I also want to ask you about that 12-month on-ramp repayment program. There'll be some that listen to his outlining of this and say, look, I mean, this sounds a lot like forbearance, which was something that made headlines earlier this year and also part of last year, is something that some borrowers had elected to participate in, not knowing that interest would continue to accrue, as Ann had outlined earlier. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, it looks like it's sort of a middle ground between forbearance and then just having the repayment start up. And it's allowing the Secretary of Education to basically waive some of the consequences of not being able to pay back loans in this first year, as people, who may be in reliance on the promise and expectation that they wouldn't have to start paying back their loans, may not be in a position to do so. So it's a little bit more gradual. That to me seems on its face as something that would be within the scope of the Secretary's authority and in keeping with things that have been done under the Trump administration and earlier in the Biden administration also. I think the question is this larger program to ultimately forgive loans in some way, whether that is going to be able to withstand legal scrutiny.
And Alexis, I mean, you heard the plan outlined here, this two-pronged approach, at least thus far. What kind of relief does this provide for these borrowers, many who were hoping for complete forgiveness? You heard outlined already some $16 million had already been approved under the president's plan that was just struck down by the Supreme Court. But I mean, does this provide some relief? And if so, how long of a runway?
Yeah, I think the short answer is no. It doesn't provide a lot of relief. I think a lot of folks were hoping for something more robust. I mean, if this is President Biden's plan B, I think it's falling quite short of what many people had hoped for. The on-ramp, that 12-month on-ramp, which gives people some breathing room, without knowing more details, just on the face of it, seems like that is something that the Biden administration might be able to push through and can provide some relief to people who need to pay back those loans. The Higher Education Act, though, and the question as to whether or not the government can, in essence, forgive some loans on a case-by-case basis. I mean, it's yet to be seen whether or not that can really get pushed through. I think at the end of the day, the takeaway for these 43 million borrowers who were pinning their hopes on the Supreme Court decision going their way is that repayments are going to start this fall. It is best to not hang your hope on a plan B, C, or D. Try to find out from your service loan provider now what your story is. Make sure your profile with them is up to date so they know how to contact you, understand when your repayments start and how much they're going to be. There are programs out there that today's decision does not impact. Programs for low-income people, the disabled, public servants still in place, and lots of other programs, income-driven repayment plans that people need to look into. Ask your loan servicer to see if you are eligible for them, and make sure that you do it soon, because those phone lines are going to be clogged. The wait lines are going to be long as you try to get through as we move closer to that October repayment deadline.
And Jay, I want to bring you back in. I mean, do you have any more guidance on who's eligible for these plans?
We don't know the answer to that, Alex. We also don't know how much money each individual borrower is eligible to have forgiven or deferred or cut down in some way. We don't know the answer to that. And again, we're waiting to get more guidance from the White House here. But the question that's really going to hang over the White House over the next few days and weeks and months is, how prepared was the administration for this decision from the Supreme Court today? You heard the president come out there and say he's going to exhaust every available means to help student loan borrowers. He's offering some longer-term plans and some shorter-term plans. But what's going to really bear out over the next few days is to what extent, to what level of detail was the administration ready for this decision? Because Republicans and Democrats alike were bracing for this decision. There was a sense that the Supreme Court was not going to side with the president on this front, and progressive Democrats pushed the administration for months to make sure they had a solid plan B. The president coming out today and saying, we have this plan B, but the question is, how much was the White House ready for this, and how much has this plan B already been deployed?
Gotcha. Well, and Ann, I want to give you a final word here. What's next for the implementation of these plans here?
So, President under a tremendous amount of political pressure here. I think the two things that we've talked about, income-driven replacement plan, you need to look at your income, see if you can qualify. They are dropping that to 5% of your income, that you can have a lower payment each month. The other thing is this grace period that we discussed. They're not going to essentially flag your account as delinquent right away, but you will accrue interest. Now, the bigger thing is the president and his aides sitting down and trying to rehash this, trying to resurrect this entire program under a different legal authority. That is going to take some time, and I would not hold my breath for that right away.
Gotcha. Ann, Alexis, Asha, Jay, thank you all.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.